we hope to start a new sutta since we already discussed Alavaka Sutta, and here actually this again comes in the Sutta Nipata, where some interesting information available, and so let's see how we can understand this, and again how we can benefit from the teaching. So basically here Buddha talks about a Muni. We can say a person who is fairly uplifted in the practice, who is a saint, we can say, and what are his practices, what are his mindsets, and how he is dwelling. And these are very interesting because Buddha himself is known as the Sakya Muni, the Muni of the Sakyan clan. Therefore, Muni is another interesting term used for a saint, not just a monk. He's a person who has fairly improved in his faculties, improved in his spiritual faculties, and therefore he is called a Muni. Now, this sutta starts with several verses. The whole sutta is filled with various verses, and the first one is going like this: Santavato bhayam jatang niketa jayate rajo aniketa ma santavang etang ve muni dassanam. Now here actually we need to understand, so the context of this sutta is more into the spiritual side, where one is practicing in a more secluded way and in a more authentic way, not like a kind of a lay practitioner who is dealing with mundane daily activities and then say doing the mindfulness practice. So then he is actually going both sides. So while he is maintaining the household life, at the same time he is trying to achieve some development in the mindfulness and various other spiritual qualities. Now here the sutta's context is very much where one has fully dedicated towards the spiritual life, and he is fully now trying to get enlightened, and probably in certain cases very much where the Buddha indicated himself or indicated the Arahant, the fully enlightened being. By knowing these things, we don't need to discourage thinking that this is the sort of the teaching that Buddha is talking, that I still can't achieve it. I am still a mundane, a lay person. How can I do this? So that is not the problem that we need to think. Rather, what is the kind of ancient teaching that Buddha has taught? What are his aims, or what are his objectives? And what are these spiritual beautiful qualities that these Buddha and the other Arahants have endowed with? So that actually gives us a lot of faith and more understanding, some deeper understanding about the teaching, because sometimes nowadays we don't even know that these kind of teachings are available. And again, what are the basic, say, particularly the policies, ethics, customs available during the Buddha's time. So knowing the ancient teachings and knowing the behaviors of such saints, we can understand, okay, this is the type of Dhamma where Buddha taught. And sometimes there may be various deviations in the present day. So sometimes we might get even discouraged by seeing the behaviors of certain monks and all these things. But by knowing the authentic teaching, one can have a lot of confidence. This is what exactly Buddha has mentioned. And Buddha himself has shown a beautiful example. And many Arahants also have shown that example. And Buddha has taught these things in these suttas, more with descriptive way. By seeing that, by knowing that, one become more confident, and a lot of faith going to be arise. And not only regarding the Buddha, but also about the Dhamma and the practitioners who are trying their best to align with the teaching. we can't say that we are completely giving up the whole mundane task, but how about at least having some time in a particular period, during that time dedicating oneself towards this kind of spiritual practice. So that is what sometimes we can say the meditation retreats are designed for, where one will leave one's all the belongings, and later one become fully practicing, fully involved with the practicing, fully dedicated kind of practicing is there. So we can say during that time we are going for some sort of interesting practice, so that we are trying to be aligned with the Buddha's teaching, trying to be aligned with what he has taught, at least for short period. It doesn't matter, I mean, we are fully dedicated and we are fully dedicated monks, rather how internally, honestly, that we are trying to live according to that. So that is what most important. So this verse, the first verse, telling more into the seclusion, where Buddha mentioned there is a peril in the intimate associated abiding. Say when we are talking with someone, when we are dealing with another person, when we are having a close intimate relationship with someone, then Buddha mentioned it's a kind of a peril. Santavato bhayang jata. So there's a peril, there's a kind of a fear, certain uncertainties, or certain dangers are there when one is living more closer to a person, getting too attached to a person. You are fully dependent on a person that has so much of undesirable outcomes. Nikete jayato rajo. And again Buddha mentioned when one is maintaining kind of an abode, so it has sort of dust. Now, probably you all can understand what are the issues in a typical household life. We may have to look after children, we may have to look after husband, wife, and we have to pay the bills and various government taxes, and so much of things are there. And sometimes the relations, neighbors, and so many things are there. And certain part is still available in the monkhood as well. But anyway, if a person is fully devoted towards the spiritual practice, giving up all the such mundane things, so he is now in a different shape, where he is not getting to that kind of a fixed abode. That's why sometimes certain monks are practicing what you call Dutanga, where he is traveling from one village to another village. He doesn't have a fixed abode. He is not fixing his fare to one particular temple or monastery, but spending some time at a particular place and then traveling to another place. One interesting such recent example is Venerable German Jnana Vimala, who actually has passed away some time back. So he is such monk. He is very respected monk who lived in Sri Lanka, and he is such a person who was traveling from one place to another place. He didn't have a fixed place. He is well known for his such kind of barefoot traveling. He, being a German monk, might have a lot of challenges, but still he enjoyed that, and he has given a very interesting example. And sometimes people are telling he is like the modern Mahakassapa. Certain today's Mahakassapa, where Mahakassapa himself is more into the Dutanga practices, austere practices. Actually, these are different ways that we can look at the Dhamma. Some people are more into this sort of hard and striving type of practices, where they find very interesting and they find giving them a lot of energy, and again are capable of removing defilements. And on the other hand, there are others who are sort of in a medium or kind of moderate type of practice in the sense the Dutanga, austere practices, but more into the in-depth understanding of the teaching, where they are giving more prominence to meditation, they are giving more prominence to intellectual understanding, exploring the Dhamma. So those things are also there. So these are different categories or different characters, we can say, when we are considering the different people. So we can't say that everybody have to have the same characteristics. So different people have different characteristics. Even during the Buddha's time. So for example, Venerable Anuruddha has one characteristic, and there are followers who have some similar characteristics. They are more interested of having divine eye and all sorts of spiritual powers, psychic powers. On the other hand, like Venerable Sariputta, who is more into the teaching, and he has in-depth understanding about the teaching, and there are many followers to him who also have the same side of likings. And on the other hand, there are monks like Venerable Moggallana who also into more psychic powers, and there are such for him also there are followers. So likewise, different people are available, different characters are available. So we don't need to think that this is what Buddha mentioned is then has to be generalized for everyone. But for a person who is more kind of interested and inspired by certain teaching, who is more dedicated towards the secluded practice, more into the spiritual secluded practice. So that is what the Muni Sutta is giving. So such kind of an inspiration. So time to time knowing these things also help us to have a lot of faith and have a kind of a direction in our understanding as well. So knowing that having too much intimate relationship is kind of an intimacy, is kind of a peril, and again understanding the having one fixed abode is kind of a dust. Now one is not having such kind of a fixed abode and doesn't have any kind of such close relationship or any kind of intimacy, and that is the person who is a Muni. So he's a one person in that sense. He doesn't have any companions. He doesn't accompany others while he is walking. So he just walk alone. And maybe from one village to another village, he is going alone. So we can say that in the ancient time, so there are such people who are more into the seclusion. And they are going from one village to another village. And people are sort of inspired by seeing them, and they start venerating them, giving them food, and respecting them, providing them whatever the necessary requisites. So those are still available even to some extent. There are certain monks who are not associating many monks, so they're simply into the seclusion, secluded practice, and such things are also, we can say, available in the Dhamma. On the other hand, so in this verse, so there is another deep meaning we can go. So that is not the mere physical or bodily seclusion, but there's a very interesting depth we can say that is also highlighted in the commentary, where the Santavato Bhayanjata Niketa Jayate Rajo. So Niketa, the abode, a house, is something explained in another suttas. One example is Halidikani Sutta in Samyutta Nikaya, where Buddha mentioned how consciousness going and associating a house. You know that we are talking about 5 aggregates: the form aggregate, feelings aggregate, perceptions aggregate, formations aggregate, and the consciousness aggregate. So the consciousness aggregate always have to associate either form aggregate, either feelings aggregate, either perceptions aggregate, or either the formations aggregate. So when it is associating form aggregate, we can say the consciousness come there, or consciousness starts associating various forms and maybe get delighted by that. As a result of that, get attached to that, and then clinging to that, and now he is living there. So the consciousness in that situation, we can say, has a house. The house is nothing but the form aggregate. More and more it is associating the form aggregate, and as a result of that, we can say, So the rupa, the form, has become the abiding place of the consciousness. And there may be other situations where the consciousness associate the feelings. Assume that we are going through some pleasurable feelings. On such situation, we are being driven by those pleasurable feelings. We are being attracted to those pleasurable feelings. And as a result of that, we being sort of conditioned by those pleasurable feelings. And now we are living in that pleasurable feelings. We are into it, we are adhere to it. Then we can safely say, okay, the consciousness is associating a house, so that is the feeling into it. So similarly, we can understand sometimes consciousness associate various perceptions. So in such situation, we can say consciousness has a house, that is through the perceptions. Similarly, there are a lot of thinking going on, various mental formations happening, various volitions are happening. Such situation, we can say the consciousness is associating more to the formations aggregate, sankhara khanda. And there Buddha mentioned now the home is available for the consciousness. So that meaning we need to properly understand, because then we can actually give some depth to this sutta. And with respect to the Buddha, it is mentioned, so he has completely abandoned that association. He has completely abandoned that house. So his consciousness, on the other hand, does not associate any house. His consciousness doesn't have any home. Our consciousness may be having, say, we can say 4 homes at least. Either the home of the forms, either the home of the feelings, either the home of the perceptions, either the home of the formations. So time to time, our consciousness go and stay on any of those houses. But on the other hand, the Buddha's consciousness, it doesn't associate any of those consciousness, any of those houses. And as a result of that, he is called a person who doesn't have a house. Okang pahaya aniketa sari, game akubbang muni santhavani, kamihi ritto apurakkarano, katang na vigaiha janena kairati. So this is an interesting verse coming in the Haliddekani Sutta, which is actually coming from Sutta Nipata, Attakavagga. And here actually an interesting discussion going on between Buddha and the one Brahmin called Haliddekani. Anyway, so the same theme is highlighted here as well. So the saint doesn't have any sort of any intimacy with anyone. Similarly, he has abandoned the house. So he has abandoned the home. Okam pahaya and aniketa sari. Now he has abandoned the house and now he is very much like homeless. He doesn't have a home. And having left home to roam without a board. So now you can say, the mental situation is actually highlighted and indicated in the physical situation as well. If the consciousness doesn't want to associate any place, so that represents that kind of a unestablished situation, homeless situation, where there is no a fixed state, fixed place for the consciousness. Rather, it has its own freedom. It has the capacity to move freely. So similarly, the homeless life is highly encouraged in the Dhamma point of view. So that is why sometimes the monkhood is considered as a homeless life, or we call it as going forth. You have been in a house, you are associating your children, you are associating your wife, you are associating your parents. That is the household life. And when one becomes a monk, so he is abandoning all those. Now he become homeless. And it is considered as going forth. Not going backward, but going forth. Because it is understood that when we have to deal with so many household activities, our mind get interrupted. So we have to engage with so many mundane activities. So we might not have enough time to practice. So likewise, many obstacles are there in the typical mundane household life. But on the other hand, if one is properly practicing the monkhood, so then there is enough time for his practice, enough time for his exploration of the Dhamma, and enough opportunities are there to live according to the Buddha's teaching, the discipline. So likewise, if one is practicing really well in the monkhood, so it's very much like a very good opportunity to want to have a very, say, speedy development in the spiritual qualities. But unfortunately, you all can understand that nowadays, even the monks are not much into the practice, so they also have various mundane kind of activities. So they do all those things, and ultimately they forget about the practice. So that is quite a common thing. So sometimes, even though they are monks, so they are also occupied with so many mundane things, and they don't have any time for themselves. They don't have any time for their own practice. So that's a kind of a pathetic situation. But anyway, Buddha mentioned in this sutta, having left home to roam without a board, in the village the sage is intimate with none. So he doesn't maintain any kind of a close relationship with anyone in the village. You know, when a monk is living in an abode, living in a kuti, so he still needs to feed. So he still needs to have some food. So he may be going on arms round, village pindapata, and there may be situations he coming to some close contact with people. But the advice is, don't get too close, maintain kind of a distance. So remember that you are a person who giving prominence to the seclusion, not much into the association. And here, by referring this particular verse, this Halidekani asks, so what is the organ? So what is the home for this consciousness? Then Buddha mentioned Rupa Dhatu Ko Gahapati Vinyanassa Oku. Rupa Dhatu Raga Vinibandhancha Pana Vinyanang Okasariti Uchati. So that indicates, so the form aggregate is a house for the consciousness, the Vinyana aggregate. Similarly, the feeling aggregate is a house for the consciousness. Perception aggregate is a house for the consciousness. And then formations, sankhara aggregate is a house for the consciousness. Whenever this consciousness associate any of these aggregates, then Buddha mentioned it is okasari. That means it is associating some sort of a house. He is not homeless. He is with a house. He is abiding in a house. So that is where the mind or the consciousness is sort of shackled by lust to a particular aggregate, and as a result of that, now it is having enough food there. It is now growing, cultivating, and well established. Suppose that the feeling, for example, if you are going through kind of a pleasurable feeling, if the mind is interested about it and mind go and attach to it, now mind starts enjoying it, being delighted by that. Now the consciousness is now getting fed, and consciousness has a house right now, so that is the feeling aggregate. So likewise, whenever we are going through some pleasurable feelings without enough mindfulness, so automatically we are being driven by that pleasurable feeling, and now consciousness has a footing. Consciousness has a kind of a fertile field to grow. So that is what typically happens. So therefore Buddha mentioned Rupa Dhatu Ko Gahapati Vinyanassa Oko. Rupa Dhatu Raga Vinibandha Pana Vinyanam Okasariti Uchati. So when consciousness associate different kinds of forms, it is called, it has become shackled, it has become entangled, it has become bounded by this form aggregate. And likewise, Buddha has mentioned about the other aggregates as well, feelings, perceptions, formations. And now, on the other hand, a Again, a question is asking, what is Niketasari? Again, roaming with a abode, kind of a dwelling place. And there's another interesting point highlighted here. Katancha gahapati Niketasari tihoti, Rupa nimitta Niketa Visara Vinibandha. Ho gahapati Niketasari iti uchati. Now this is something very interesting, where how one's mind associating certain objects through the sense faculties. We all know that through eyes we can see various forms, through ears we can hear various sounds, through the nose we can smell various odors, through the tongue we can recognize various tastes, and through the body we can recognize various tangibles, and through the mind we can recognize various mental objects. Interesting point is, when such recognition going to happen, when eyes fairly in line with different kinds of forms, now the eye consciousness is happening, and at such situation, so those nimittas, those signs, those marks, Rupa Nimitta Niketa Visara Vinibandha, is causing various defilements to come out by diffusion and confinement in the abode. Now diffusion means various defilements are sort of start popping up due to that association. Say for example, if a boy, for example, if he's looking at a girl, so now that's the form aggregate, and that form aggregate helps for the defilements also to arise from that association. At the same time, the mind being blocked there, mind being confined to that, so it has a kind of a capacity to get attracted there. So various such kind of objects are there, enough objects are there. So whenever mind sort of start associating that, one side is that you are generating more and more defilements. The other side is that you are being sort of dragged towards that. You are being shackled towards that. You are being bounded towards that. So there are two situations in that sense. It's kind of a we can say having some sort of addiction, where you are being addicted sometimes because it is giving some satisfaction, and you are being, as a result of, you are confined to that, you can't get out of it, and it is promoting more and more defilements. So all the different kinds, the most of the beautiful sights, sounds, smells, tastes, etc., so has that capacity. So whenever our mind unmindfully locate to that, through the eyes, for example, through the ears, for example. So likewise, suppose there is a beautiful song being heard. So through the ears we can hear it. So at that time what happens is that it may be a very small word, maybe a very slight word, a little music that we have heard. So it is not the full song probably even. But that very nimitta, that very small signs help the mind to get bounded towards that, the mind to get attracted towards that. So it has such kind of a enticing kind of a characteristics, where whenever through the ears a segment of sound being heard, so that segment of sound has the capacity to get the mind bounded towards that. So the mind being very much restricted there now, confined to that. And not only that, the various defilements are also growing. So that is why Visara Vinibandha. So these are two terms. Visara means various defilements are now emanating, various defilements are now promoting, defilements are generating as a result of that association. And the Vinibandha means the mind being shackled there, mind being entangled there, mind being sort of restricted, confined there. Now this is what constantly happening in our mind. So through the eyes, whenever we go through various sights, so this is going to happen. Through the ears, when we hear various sounds, this is going to happen. Through the nose, when we recognize various smells, fragrances. So this is going to happen. Whenever we going through various, say, delicacies, delicious tastes, this is going to happen. Similarly, when we going through certain tangibles, this again can happen. And various thoughts when popping up in the mind, this again can happen. So, I mean, it's very difficult to get out of this vicious cycle. Because we know, so we being dragged towards that, we being attracted towards that, and the mind being confined to that particular object, that attractive object. And at the same time, various defilements are now generated, and it may have a certain amount of delight as well. Now we are fully entangled, we are fully shackled. So that is why unmindful handling of faculties is quite dangerous. So when one is not mindful, so all the faculties are quite vulnerable, and it may involve with various forms, sounds, etc. So mind is playing kind of havoc on such situation, because again and again being driven by defilements coming, generated through eyes, generated through ears, generated through nose, tongue, body, mind. At the same time, during that time, mind being sort of shackled there, mind being entangled there. So kind of a sad situation happening in our mind. Again and again it get polluted, again and again it get involved. While being there, it get further and further polluted, further and further defiled. So on the other hand, when one's mind does not associate like that, when one's mind is not established like that onto any forms, onto any sounds, smells, taste, tangibles, thoughts, so that means the consciousness is not associating any abode, any house. As a result of that, so the defilements cannot arise, and there is no shackling, there is no entanglement, there is no sort of restriction, confinement. Rather, the mind is free. Consciousness is not established. The mind feels kind of a freedom. So that's something actually we can say, something that we can explore. The typical addictive nature is again and again get attracted towards various sense objects, and as a result of that it is shackled there, entangled there, bounded there. But unfortunately it gives a little bit of satisfaction, kind of a delight, and various defilements are also growing. So this is the typical mundane, unmindful living. But on the other hand, if one is mindful, then he can say, okay, even though he can see things, mind is not going and involved with them. Ditte ditta mattam bhavisati. So he still see things, but mind is not get involved there. Consciousness does not go and involve in the forms, the sights. The consciousness is capable of maintaining its balance. Consciousness is capable of maintaining its peaceful abiding, peaceful type of existence without getting involved with those different kinds of sights. Similarly, the sounds, when various sounds are there, sute sutamattam bhavisati, where mind is not affected, mind maintain its clarity, mind maintain its silence, not getting involved with these sounds. Similarly, when there are smells, when there are, say, tastes, and when there are tangibles, still one can recognize them, but still mind maintain its clarity, mind maintain its unbound nature. There may be certain thoughts coming once a while, but mind may recognize it, the consciousness recognizes, but let it go, not getting involved, not getting entangled, not driven by that. So as a result of that, we can say one is sort of experiencing fair amount of freedom. You don't need to confine to any of those objects. Rather, the mind behaves freely. So your mind is not shackled, your mind is not imprisoned. Rather, the mind enjoys sort of a freedom where you may experience. One may enjoy that. At the beginning, you might not even understand what's really going on. But slowly, when one is sort of familiarizing with this process, one may start to enjoy that. Okay, now the mind is free rather than being shackled. Now the mind is free without being bound, no defilements even. So as a result of that, Buddha mentioned, okay, one experiences very peaceful abiding. One experiences very calm abiding, very tranquil abiding. And the mind is fairly clean, mind is pure. So therefore we can say, so this Muni Sutta is talking to that kind of deep teachings, and we'll explore what are the other teachings and what are the other verses available in this Sutta from next week also. So with that note, I'd like to conclude today's Dhamma sermon. Now I'd like to open the session for questions.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Today we have 6 questions, including one from last session. First question is a general question. Dear Bhante, we heard from the organizers that they are planning a tour for Bhante in Australia to conduct residential retreats. I have participated in a residential retreat and found that the practice and experience is very different from daily practice of 1 hour. Is this because we get a chance to keep aside the 5 defilements for longer time to observe the working of the mind? Much merits for Bhante's explanation how a full-on retreat can elevate our practices. With metta, that is the end of the question.
Yeah, very true. Because in the typical daily practice in a household environment, fair amount of distractions are available, and you can't continue sometimes, and only limited to a small time period, and you can't sometimes maintain enough proper sila, the morality, and many disturbances are there. But on the other hand, when you are joined with a retreat, you get enough opportunities to cultivate mindfulness, to develop wisdom, and all these opportunities are there. And important thing is you are doing it continuously, not just abandoning at a small level, but you are further and further strengthening that, continuously strengthening that. Say you are in a 10 days retreat, then first day also you are practicing, second day also you are practicing, third day also you are practicing. So likewise, as you are continuing, there's a higher opportunity for these faculties to grow continuously without much interruption. And there are like-minded people also, and they also striving, they also doing their best, and by seeing that you also get encouraged. At the same time, say you are able to understand or participate in Dhamma discussions, you are able to participate in Dhamma teachings or Dhamma sermons. That also help you to abandon whatever the sort of doubts we have in regard to your practice. So likewise, a very conducive environment for a person to further do a boost to your practice. Certainly, yes. Nirupa can't hear. Yeah.
A second question out of 6. Dear Bhante, during walking, I start focusing on the feet and the observations on the soul. Usually, I recognize how the pressure distributes around the soul, hot and cold nature, and hard and smooth patches. After 10 to 15 minutes of continuous practice, these sensations fade away, and I observe only the touch of the walking. There is no noting at this time, and no images or thoughts around how I walk as well. I feel the impact of the touch and noting nothing else coming from the lower part of the body. I can still see the walking path, and it is more or less a gaze than looking or seeing something. At a distance, I hear sounds as well. This situation is similar to the sitting experience when the breath fades away and when we reach an empty space and suspended awareness. Thought of reporting to Bhante as I am not sure if it is possible to compare sitting and walking, since we start with completely different objects and the methods are different. With metta, that is the end of the question.
I think such evolution can happen, say, if you are not within a day or two, but as you are continuing the practice for a considerable period of time. So within a particular session, within a particular, say, walking session, so that evolution can happen. You start with maybe a noting and say left, right, whatever it is, and then you can neglect that, you can abandon that, you can simply maintain a silent awareness, silent comprehension of the various phenomena. So as you are more and more comprehending, knowing those different phenomena, so those phenomena become very much like mixed, like a flux, and then the mind starts kind of a dispassion towards the whole process. And now the mind somewhat detached from the whole process. You don't need to push your mind back to the phenomena. The mind likes to be secluded rather than getting involved with all these different conditioned phenomena. Now mind likes to enjoy the freedom slowly. Not the complete freedom yet, but still some amount of dispassion is there. So you are simply seeing it and not being too much analyzing or too much comprehending the subtle details. So this is possible, and therefore such evolution is actually possible as you are continuing for a long time.
A third question out of 6, and this is a general question. Dear Bhante, as we have heard, when one became a stream enterer, self-view is eradicated, but conceit stays on until one became Arahat. Can you explain how conceit or mana can remain after self-view or Sakkaya Ditthi is eradicated? Much merits for your service. With metta. That is the end of the question.
Yeah, self-view basically one level of we can say a misunderstanding, wrong understanding, thinking that the body has a person, the body has an individual, a body has a self, a lasting self, an ongoing self, a permanent self. So for example, sometimes we think, okay, this body has a self, kind of a soul available in the body. That's everlasting, going from one life to another life. So such kind of a wrong understanding is abandoned when we are abandoning the Sakkaya Ditthi. So similarly, one can have a wrong view, thinking that these feelings are the self. There is a person who is going through the feelings. So that kind of wrong understanding is also abandoned. Similarly, there may be various perceptions, signs, marks, etc., and through which one can say, okay, I am that perceptions, I am there, I am in that perceptions. So that is a very gross kind of a wrong understanding, thinking that any of these aggregates have a person, have an individual, have a kind of a, say, a self. So that is the only thing abandoned when one becomes a Sotapanna. But still, there is conceit, I am, but we can't say it is coming from a particular aggregate, a kind of an effect coming through all the aggregates. So that is being well explained in the Khemaka Sutta. Yeah, Venerable Khemaka being a anagami, non-returner, he mentioned he himself still has the sense of I, even though he does not consider form aggregate as I, feelings aggregate as I, formations aggregate as I, consciousness aggregate as I. So he doesn't consider there is a person inside any of these aggregates, but anyway, there's a sense of I. It's a kind of a very subtle thing. So he is giving a very beautiful simile there. So there is a scent, a kind of a fragrance coming from a flower. So he is mentioning, you can't say the fragrance is coming from petals. Fragrance is coming from, say, any other parts of the flower. But fragrance is coming. So similarly, he mentioned, even though I am not considering form aggregate as myself, feelings aggregate as myself, perceptions aggregate as myself, formations aggregate as myself, consciousness aggregate as myself, still some subtle conceit is available. The sensation of, or the sense of I is still available. Therefore, we can say when one becomes a Sotapanna, what is abandoned is that gross form of personality view. But till one become an Arahant, one still have a very subtle sense of I am. So that is what we call as the Asmiman.
Fourth question out of 7. This is related to mindful sitting. Dear Venerable Bhante, I have been practicing mindfulness for a few years and participated in several retreats as well. My sitting and walking have progressed over the time period thanks to your continuous guidance. This forum helped to improve the practice a lot as well, thus much merits to all who support to conduct this weekly session. During sitting and walking, I can establish mindfulness within first 5 to 10 minutes most of the time. Distractions and deviations are not big issue, and with your guidance, I have practiced the techniques of keeping mindfulness intact and handle these distractions with positive mindset. Nowadays, my observations focus naturally on thoughts. This happens during both sitting and walking. After establishing mindfulness, thoughts start to come, but they are at a distance, unlike the distractions. However, I do not know how to be mindful on thoughts, as this is new to me. I try to keep my attention to the body awareness all the time. Appreciate Bhante's advice. Much merits. That's the end of the question.
Yeah, I think you will learn gradually. So when you are able to understand, or you are able to observe various bodily phenomena with a detached mind, where you are maintaining kind of a distance. So that is where the physical phenomena are happening, and you are able to observe those physical phenomena using some mental phenomena. Now, the same situation happens when Chittanupassana going on. So various mental phenomena are happening, and you are able to observe those mental phenomena using some more mental phenomena. So it's a kind of a gradual development that you may go through, and that is a kind of a skill coming from the early practices. It is not that immediately you are able to do that, because sometimes when you start observing, you being driven by the defilements, you've been driven by those thoughts. So those thoughts are quite having the deceiving nature. So as a result of that, it's quite difficult to maintain kind of a detached observation. But with practice, you develop this skill. As you develop mindfulness, as you develop clear comprehension, then those two coupled together, sati and sampajanya, mindfulness and clear comprehension, helps you to maintain that detached observation, even into the mind. So as a result of that, now you don't need to worry. You can simply look at a lustful thought as a lustful thought, angry thought as an angry thought, without getting involved with it, without criticizing you, without being driven by lust or hatred or whatever it is. You simply know, okay, now lust is available, now greed is available, now anger is available. So likewise, you can do that objective observation. Rather than being driven by any of those, being subject to type of thing, now you can do a objective observation. You are looking at them as sort of objectively. So that is something that you may slowly develop.
Fifth question out of 7. Dear Bhante, this is a general question. Dear Bhante, during our practice of mindfulness, is it possible to see tanha and observe its working, or is it this something we understand from the inferential and deduction knowledge? During the sitting and walking practice, the furthest we have heard is get into the refined state of non-attached mind. and observe the flux-like phenomena. Is the working of tanha underneath this layer, and can that be practically verified? Much merits for your valuable insights, Bhante. That is the end of the question.
Yeah, it may be possible because there is a link, Vedana Pachya Tanha, where the feelings conditions the craving, feelings conditions various desires. That is something that you yourself can investigate. So see whether whenever you going through some pleasurable feelings, what is happening to your mind. So there may be a slight attachment towards that feelings. There may be a desire towards those feelings. You may want to hold those pleasurable feelings. You want those pleasurable feelings to have some more time. You like to have them in the future as well. So likewise, all these are the tanha. All these are different forms of tanha, craving, operating in our mind. So that is where whenever we are going to say pleasurable feelings, so if we are not very mindful, so automatically the craving going to happen. So by understanding that is not that difficult in that sense. So as we discussed last time, so when you have mindfulness and clear comprehension, you can observe various feelings happening, and if those are mostly the pleasurable feelings, you can see how mind get sort of kind of a delight. Mind want to have it, mind likes it, mind want to enjoy it more, mind desires that more. So likewise, that desire is another phenomena, tanha, where you can understand.
Sixth question out of 8. Bhante, what exactly is Rupa? Does it refer to the physical phenomena of the 4 elements, or is it the construction of the object in the mind? In the dependent organization, there is Nama Rupa. Is this the same as the 5 aggregates? Panchaskandha of Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, and Vijnana. Are all these 5 manifestations in the mind only which are linked to? Also, is this why Buddha said mind is the forerunner and everything is mind made, etc. And sati in present moment is important to respond with wisdom than react negatively, heedlessly. Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu. That is the end of the question.
Yeah, actually Buddha has given some direct definition for form, rupa. So if you can refer Kajjaniya Sutta, where Buddha mentioned Rupatitiko Bhikkave Tasma Rupanti Uchchati, where these forms are subjected to various deformations. So that is why they are being called rupa. So, and again, rupa is defined as 4 primary elements or 4 main elements, where the Patavi Dhatu, Apo Dhatu, Tejo Dhatu, Ayo Dhatu, where the earth element, water element, fire element, and the air element. So they are we can say, the constituents of the physicality. So different physical components are there. So that is what available in the physical side. And we may even experience that our bodies are physical. So what we see in the environment is physical. So likewise, some physical phenomena are there. So that is considered as the form aggregate. And form aggregate, therefore, we can say, is what we are trying to understand through Dhatu Manasikara, for example, and how it manifests. Like we discuss, say, the earth element manifests as hardness, smoothness, grossness, or smoothness, heaviness, lightness. So like that is how the earth element manifests. Then the water element manifests like fluidity and cohesion. Then the air element manifests like the movement, vibrations. The heat element manifests as hot and cold. So we can say all these are some physical phenomena. So that is what considered as the form aggregate. So we can't simply say, therefore, it is a simple manifestation of the mind. So form aggregates, therefore, we can say it's also manifests due to their own causes and conditions.
Seventh question out of 8. This is related to Dhamma 7 question. If Rupa or form is part of the consciousness, then why is Rupa separated from Nama? And refer to as Nama Rupa, please. Thank you, Bhante. That is the end of the question.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
If Rupa or form is part of the consciousness, then why is Rupa separated from Nama? And refer to...
Yeah, now actually in the last question also you have asked about Nama Rupa. So that Nama Rupa, they are actually refer to the sign taken from that form aggregate. You can't say it is the direct physical Rupa mentioned there. What is available there are the sign extracted from that physical form. So that is where name and form is the most subtlest indication happening in the mind, which has some extracts coming from the Rupa, the physical Rupa, and that is the sign of the Rupa that is taken at that level. And on the other hand, when you consider the 5 aggregates, so the 5 aggregates are divided again into name and Nama Rupa. So there it's in a way we can say later division where the feelings, formations, perceptions, consciousness, so they are considered as the mental activities or mental aggregates, and the form aggregate itself is considered as the Rupa. So we don't need to confuse this categorization with the name and form we are talking in the Patissamuppada.
Yeah, this is the last question, Bhante. It is related to mindful sitting. Dear Bhante, I can reach the state of purple lotus kind of thing popping up from my inner when I do mindful sitting. I can stay any longer with this status. No thoughts come to my mind, no words either. I wanted to know what my next step after this will. Thank you. That is the end of the question.
Can you repeat that purple? I didn't understand. The
purple lotus kind of thing popping up from my inner when I do mindful sitting.
So it could be, if you are practicing Anapanasati, mindful breathing, so there's a possibility that you are getting a concentration sign. So for concentration, sign can manifest in different forms. Sometimes like this, what you are explaining, like a kind of a flower, sometimes kind of a cloud, sometimes like a light. So likewise, different possibilities are there. For you, it seems that you are getting kind of a flower. But the thing is, that indicates your concentration is fairly developing. And now I better like to suggest you to do some more investigation rather than trying to going only towards the samatha practice, because what you are going through is more into the samatha side, tranquility part, not much into the vipassana. So therefore better do some subtle investigations into your breath, see whether the breathing is longer or shorter, whether you are experiencing the beginning, the middle, the end, from which nostril it is going in, from which nostril it is going out. So likewise, try to investigate more subtle characteristics of the breathing. Then it will be more you are into giving some support to your wisdom part as well.
That was the last question, Bhante.
Yeah.
We come to the end of the program. And I would first like to thank Bhante for his valuable time. Also, we would like to pass our minutes to everyone, both seen and unseen, who are enabling this program. And we pass our minutes to all participants for joining the program. With that, I would like to conclude the program today. Thero.
Yeah, Thero.